Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food and with movement. And today we're going to answer another question of you guys, and this question was how to deal with chronic illness and eating disorder recovery. So before I start answering that question, I want to say a few sentences about eating disorders and the relation to chronic illness and the other way around. There's actually a huge amount of people who have chronic illness and suffer from an eating disorder. And while it is not completely scientifically proven why that is, there are a few things that come to mind when we think about those topics. Reason number one is a lot of people with chronic illness actually have issues to eat properly. So whether that is something like IBS, diabetes, or other things that can have an impact on your eating, we know from experience that not eating enough can be a huge trigger for developing an eating disorder. So that might be one reason. But there's of course a billion other chronic illnesses out there who don't necessarily have to do with your eating, but they can have to do with your pain, they can have to do with the way you feel about yourself, with not being able and engaging in so many things, with being fatigued, and a bunch of other things. So eating disorders have a big component, and that component, it is not the same for everyone, but for a lot of people, control plays a huge role in eating disorders. Feeling like you're losing control over your body, over the way you feel, or even over your life because you're not able to do as many things anymore can be a huge trigger for eating disorders, because again, they can be a way of false control. And what I mean by that is we're actually losing even more control to our eating disorders, but when we're in the eating disorder, it can feel like we have control because we are controlling our weight, our body, our movement, our food, or whatever it is we're dealing with. Another aspect is that some people also develop a chronic illness due to their eating disorder. So due to malnutrition, things like organ damage, hormonal imbalances, and a bunch of other things can happen. Now, this is of course never your fault. The eating disorder itself is not your fault, but it can feel easy to blame it on yourself and to be like, oh my God, I did that to myself and now I'm suffering even more. And that can also get in the way of recovery. So whatever it is and whatever came first, just be aware that eating disorder recovery is still possible. Now we're going to talk about recovery a little bit more and what makes recovery from an eating disorder different when you have a chronic illness. So one point, of course, can be the pain. A lot of people with chronic illness have a lot of pain and fatigue. And dealing with that while you're trying to recover from an eating disorder can be extremely hard. Eating disorder recovery is already hard, and for a lot of people it goes along with pain and fatigue already. And reasons for that can be water retention, changes in the body, also like the healing process as well can be painful. It is not always painful, but it can be very painful. Oftentimes we start to heal the damage that we have done to our bodies when we just start to gain weight, because before that we were so numb that we couldn't even feel anything. And fatigue also plays a huge role in recovery. A lot of people feel a lot of fatigue, which is a very common and normally not a dangerous symptom of recovery. Oftentimes it's actually just the body trying to tell you that you need more rest, which is necessary in recovery. But as always, please see a doctor, of course. It is always important to be supervised by a doctor while you're going through recovery, and especially if something feels off. Now, having those pain and fatigue levels that a lot of people already have, being combined with chronic illness, can feel so painful and unbearable that a lot of people with chronic illness feel like, I don't know if I can do it. Because before that, it was not as bad. And now that I'm feeling more, I feel even worse than I felt before I started recovery. Another thing that plays a big role, of course, if you are taking medications for your chronic illness, or if you have any kind of restrictions when it comes to food, it can make it even harder to choose recovery, because in recovery you want to eat freely, and that is what a lot of people should focus on. But of course, if you cannot eat certain things due to your chronic illness, make sure to still work on the mindset around food and allow yourself to eat as much of the things that you can eat. So what I mean by that is, just because you are not allowed to eat certain foods, or you might still be more careful with what you're eating, does not mean that this is an excuse to not eat enough overall. Again, for somebody who doesn't have any restrictions, as a coach, I would always tell them to eat everything they are craving. But of course, if you can't have certain things, it is super important to make sure that you still eat enough of other food groups and that you're still not restricting. A big part is also movement. Some doctors might tell you that you have to move or that movement is super important for your chronic illness. And while that might be the case for some people, in the majority of cases, it's actually not that true. And in addition to that, in eating disorder recovery, we want to be extra careful with movement. And I always think about it like this. Your body is already fighting the chronic illness and the chronic disease. It is already struggling with this, but it needs a lot of energy and takes a lot out of the body. Now you're also recovering from an eating disorder, which needs a lot of energy too, and which is one of the reasons why so many people need to rest so much. And of course, also in order to rewire the mindset around movement, we have to take a step back oftentimes. So if you feel like movement is necessary, try to minimize it as much as possible. Maybe you can do some yoga instead of walking around all day. Maybe some stretching is enough. So finding the right balance, especially for people with chronic illness, with movement and recovery is extremely important. Again, for somebody who doesn't have any restrictions, I actually advise my clients to stop working out completely and to minimize movement for a certain amount of time. But if for some reason that is not possible for you, try to really focus on the right types of movement. Also, try to find something that is not triggering you, because there's a lot of movements out there that people talk about a lot or that are labeled in a certain way. Therefore, we already put them in a certain box. So we want to make sure that you find something that you can do without being triggered and without being in the ED mindset again. Speaking of mindset work is already super important in eating disorder recovery. If you struggle with a chronic illness, it is also super important to focus on the mindset around your chronic illness and around the eating disorder and recovery. So if you feel like recovery is making things worse, remind yourself of why you're doing this and that this is a temporary state, and it doesn't mean that your recovery is making your chronic illness symptoms worse, but that this is a part of healing and that in the long run it will actually make it better. You are regaining control over your life, and even though you have a chronic illness, you will still have more power over your life than you had when you had your eating disorder. The chronic illness can feel so unfair, and it can be so heartbreaking to be like, why is it me? I wish I could just be healthy. I wish I could just live a quote-unquote regular or normal life. And yes, those thoughts are super, super valid. But don't let the eating disorder twist them around into you don't deserve it or let me help you to have more control. Because in fact, if you recover from your eating disorder, you will regain control. And so yes, you will have to live with your chronic illness. And you are more than allowed to be mad or upset about it. But you can still regain more control over your life. Focusing on the things you want to do once you're recovered can be so helpful, because that shows you that you still have a lot of power even though you're struggling with a chronic illness. For some people, it can also be helpful to work with a holistic approach. So to find somebody who works not only with Western medicine, which there is nothing wrong with Western medicine, but for some people working with like different kinds of movements, supplements, or even nervous system healing can be so helpful in healing their relationship with food and in their recovery, but also in their chronic illness journey. Because oftentimes there's like still things that can help to ease the symptoms and that can help to strengthen the body. Now, if your nervous system is already dysregulated, chances are that you might feel the chronic illness symptoms even stronger. So working on nervous system regulation can play a huge part, and it is something that I already do with my clients, and I would definitely do it with somebody who has chronic illness, because again, it can be so helpful to just feel better overall, and that can give you more motivation in your recovery journey. There are a lot of people out there who have a chronic illness and still recovered from eating disorders. And I mention that because sometimes it's so easy to lose ourselves and to feel like something is impossible for us because we have this chronic illness. But knowing that there's other people out there that we can look up to as role models can be super helpful, because if somebody else was able to do it, you can do it too. I really hope this video helped you and gave you some more motivation in your recovery journey. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions and if this video was helpful. And of course, as always, if you have any other questions, let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one.